A warm welcome to the audience and a grateful hello to our guest, fashion designer Rick Owens. I feel today many of us are asking the following questions. What is the new normal? What was the old normal? What is normal at all? I feel fortunate to share this Polimoda Duets episode with Rick, of all people. Throughout the last 20 years, Rick's presence in and impact on the fashion industry has been labeled as visionary, heretic, provocative, prophetic, and even crazy. It is as if your designs, Rick, somehow have been preparing the world for this moment. A moment that turns all conventions in politics, business, education, relationships, you name it, on its head. I can't think of a better guide to help us move beyond conundrums and contradictions into a space of new opportunities and possibilities. Rick, your sensibility is often perceived as contrarian to the mainstream, to the status quo. In 2018, you spoke of being pissed off and a sense of anger motivating your collections. How is Rick Owens feeling right now in 2020?
Well, I'm feeling very serene, actually. Being able to have a moment to pause, it felt like a great opportunity to reset. And I think there's a lot of people that felt that way. Now, I'm coming from a very privileged position. I had a comfortable place to quarantine in. I was in Paris with Michelle, and we had space, we had trees, we had so it wasn't as stressful as it was for a lot of people. So I mean, I hesitate to make it sound as pleasurable as it was, but I have to admit that being able to retreat like that was a gift. Obviously, there was a sense of threat and mortality. I felt that it was kind of my moral responsibility to take that time to research and to learn and to appreciate all of the beauty that had come my way. It was an uncomfortable time, I repeat, for a lot of people. So total respect to that. And I was thinking about all of the pressures of workers on the front line, having to deal with people's discomforts. And I was thinking, this is not my moment to participate. This is theirs, and I'm just going to sit back and I am going to feed myself until my time comes, until it's time for me to make my contribution to culture. And I think fashion can be. I think aesthetics and beauty are an essential part of human living, and have always had a very important part in humanity's development and in culture and in civilization. Fashion has not always been at the forefront of that, but it's been an element. And so I do feel a sense of responsibility where fashion is concerned. And in the last 10 years, what's great is that because of awareness of sustainability and ecology, fashion, the word responsibility has entered into the conversation in the fashion world. And there's a lot of people that have used it as a gimmick and hyped it, and it doesn't matter. That's great. I mean, if it's a gimmick, it's one of the best gimmicks we've ever had. And if if only a fraction of it is paid attention to, that's great. That's a win-win situation. So yeah, I kind of rambled on and off of your question.
No, but I kind of want to distill this a little bit just with a follow-up. there's a lot of protests that are happening in the United States, against police brutality, racism. There's a lot of rage and anger that's currently being spilled out into the streets, protests, etc. What is the role of such anger and rage in fashion, and specifically in the creative process?
Fashion has been used as protest before, and young generations have reacted against the generations before them um, in the way they present themselves. That is a cycle that we are familiar with historically. Um, Protest and frustration uh, by being put in a situation by a previous generation that is so classic um, that I wonder if it's an essential cycle. Um, um, I remember my dad telling me once, and I was frustrated about something, and um, he told me, Richard, life isn't fair. And I remember just being furious by having my frustrations and my discomforts dismissed like that. Um, I just boiled. And years and years later, I thought that's some of the best advice I've ever gotten. We're not entitled to comfort or happiness, I think. Um, and any bit that we get, we're lucky for. Any bit that we struggle to earn or to um, so anger and frustration, I recognize it and I sympathize with it and I feel empathy towards it. But life has always been a struggle, and more extremely for some than others. And it's unfortunate. And we have to all, uh, being polite is one of the most important things there is. I mean, empathy but it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen all the time. And it's silly to, um, oh, not silly. It's unrealistic to expect that. So the best thing we can teach our children is how to respond in the most graceful way. So I certainly don't have an answer, but I mean those are kind of my thoughts on the subject.
Talking about kind of happiness and comfort, you're no stranger to nudity, both in your own self-expression and on the runways. Why bother with clothes at all?
Well,
Isn't
those are communication, and nudity is a form of communication too. Nudity in a certain context uh, can say a lot of things. Exposing penises on a runway, we're talking about masculinity. We're looking at men's fashion and we're talking about masculinity and clothes. I mean, if you consider just blue jeans and how blue jeans became a symbol of virility, and part of that was just explained by the fading pattern that kind of radiated from the crotch. So, I mean, to overlook um, what fashion is about, fashion, a lot of times it's about enhancing the anatomy. And so, um, and with women, we've seen historically very low bustiers and low corsets that really emphasize the cleavage you know, um, in Louis Couture's court,
the,
Louis Couture's court.
you don't see naked body as a sort of contradiction to fashion, but more of a complement to it.
Well, the thing is when I present them, I'm doing it in a theatrical setting. I mean, I'm not promoting um, people not wearing pants, but and when one does a runway, um, you're going to make an extreme example of things, but um, it would be wrong to address the changes the changes in the way people have seen the human body. I mean, just if you look at the gym physiques that we have now that we didn't have 30 years ago, um, the emphasis on a more fit body changes the way people dress. Um, so, and you know, I've said in the past, I like very glibly, I had said that working out is a modern couture, but people remembered that, and the reason they remembered that is because there was something that kind of makes sense about that. It did change the way people think about clothes, the way people spent time in the gym instead of time in the couture fittings. Um, there is a difference there. Something changed, and you know, we can recognize that, and that's why that ridiculous statement kind of resonated with some people.
You know, I want to talk a little bit about your education because, you know, we are here on behalf of Polimoda, and I know you studied fine art and then moved on to trade training and pattern making. But I wonder, is it even possible to be educated in fashion?
Well, you know, I've always, I never liked school, and I never really, um, I no, I wasn't a great student ever. I was just kind of did what I wanted, and I didn't show up and all of that. Um, but the value of school to me, from what I can see, from my perspective, is that you have an energy, a concentration of energy on people trying to figure things out. And I mean, there's a lot of things that you can learn. And in fashion, I mean, I learned how to sew and I learned how to construct clothes. And that was essential for me because that allowed me to create my own language in the way clothes were constructed, which now that doesn't mean that that's essential for every designer. That was just my way of doing it and the way I was able to define what I do. I think, you know, there's a lot of designers that don't know how to construct clothes and don't know. Um, I mean, I think, you know, when I look at all of that stuff on Saint Laurent and see those kind of abstract sketches he would sketch and give to his atelier, um, I'm thinking there was somebody in that atelier that was able to translate that and create magic. And that kind of balance, if he had had a different person that hadn't been able to really capture his nuances, it would have been a totally different story. Um,
If we're to round this up, you mentioned sort of clothing, construction of clothing, be able to illustrate. Maybe one more piece of advice for those considering to study fashion.
oh, um, oh yeah, I was saying that school wasn't important, right? Uh, But what it does do is that it creates a concentration of like-minded people who are going in the same direction. Um, and you build a community, and you build a community that is going to stand you in good stead later on. Um, creativity, you know, I was thinking about the whole school thing, and I was thinking the best recommendation I could come up with is we should start a dating app where where somebody that wants to be a CEO can find a creator, because that is the key. That is my key. I was able to kind of do my creative thing all on my own, and I was independent, and I wasn't afraid of being poor and all of that. So I was just kind of doing my own little thing in my corner in Hollywood Boulevard when Italian manufacturers had heard about me, and they came and they proposed linking up so that they could distribute and manufacture my stuff. And that was a marriage that made it work. Um, that and I've always joked with them that creativity is 5% of the equation, and the 95% is the execution. So that's why I think we have to start a dating app where, and we're going to make millions, where people who are interested in the business side can date creators that they have an affinity for, that they have a that something clicks, and that is the kind of marriage that can make a business work, because creators are notoriously um, not great at business, not great at which is a complete different talent, and but it's almost every bit as creative and poetic as the actual designer. Um, that's my big advice.
And I will ask you a couple more questions about business later on, but I kind of want to wrap up this education point by asking you the following. You know, you famously reject the textbook process of mood boards and references, but we live in a world of increasing digitalization of visual culture, and the fashion production process has been digitalized. How do you see the future of hands-on old school approach?
Well, I rejected that. But I mean, that was bullshit, because I do have um, tons of visual references on my phone, on my laptop. I mean, I have a mood board. It's just in a different format, I suppose. Everybody has mood boards. Everybody has references. Every designer has studied things that have come before. So we're not operating in a vacuum. We have and any creative gesture is pretty much a poetic combination. It's a personal composition of elements that you've accumulated. Um, yeah, I have my version of a mood board. But what was the rest of the question?
Do you see the future in this hands-on old school approach
Oh yeah, maybe
versus
not.
those with there's an app for that type of thing?
Yeah, maybe not. I mean, it's evolution. I mean, do we have rotary dials on our phones anymore? No. I mean, things change, and to cling to obsolete conventions is not smart. Um, maybe, and I can see how sentimental craft might become um, archaic and something fresher. Um, I mean, we've seen the era of the creative director emerge, and I don't know if that's a bad thing. I mean, it seems like someone like me, would disapprove, and I mean, and kind of disdain somebody who just directs instead of creates with their hands. Um, but personal, like, just as a silly example, I used to sew my first toiles myself. I used to drape something, cut it, make the pattern, and sew it myself. I don't do that anymore, because that would be a waste of what I'm good at. That would almost be the wrong thing to do. It would be indulgent for me um, to waste the best part of me by doing doing something that I mean, it would just be pointless.
I
Um,
always find that learning how to delegate is sort of another talent that you pick up along the way of your professional development, right?
yeah.
I sense that. And you moved your operations to Paris in 2003. Would you consider that move a necessary element in terms of business of fashion in 2020?
I don't know. I mean, after this break, it seems like anything could happen. It seems like it seems like maybe it's going to be this huge break that changes everything. It's hard to imagine. Um, all I know is that Paris Fashion Week is a really different thing than Paris, because Paris, uh, um, anytime other than Fashion Week, is very conservative,
Mhm.
and very uptight and very um, intolerant a little bit. But when Fashion Week rolls around, um, Paris demands almost a um, perverse boldness, demands audacity, just because of the history of all of the audaciousness that creators have expressed before in that city. Um,
Mhm.
so I kind of do feel that Paris will still, just because everybody has to collect somewhere at some time for energy to happen. So Paris Fashion Week in other countries have people have attempted, and it just doesn't click. And you know, it's the reason why there's a film industry in Hollywood. There's it just that's just the way things land. Um, so I would still, as a young person, I would still want to show my collections in Paris. There's a tradition and a history and um, a legacy that I would want to connect with. Um,
Sure.
but I mean, LA could be great too. And you know, we can do anything from anywhere. We're talking from Portland. You're talking to me from Portland, and we're talking about a school. We're doing this for a school in Florence. It's a different world where, but I do kind of feel that physically for things to really develop, and especially something as sentimental as and poetic as fashion needs to be, I think people are going to have to connect and work face to face. I've tried working um, from a distance. I tried working from Paris and not going to the factory in Italy at a certain point. I thought, you know, I've been doing this for 10 years. We've developed a relationship now. We should be able to understand each other where I can get this stuff done from Paris. And it didn't work. It just didn't, something about it. Maybe it was my communication skills or my delegation skills, but it just didn't feel right. And I ended up going back to my regular trips to the factory in Italy. So there's something about that human connection that it leads me to believe that showing collections in Paris is still a good idea.
I want to talk a bit about the ownership. You know, you're one of the very few high-profile fashion labels that are independently owned. You know, Giorgio Armani, Rei Kawakubo, Comme des Garçons. It's a very short list, in fact. But I'm curious, what have been some of the biggest unexpected challenges of keeping the brand ownership?
Um, I think when we started out, we never really compared ourselves to corporate brands. It was always we always kind of had an independent brand in as a goal, and we never expected to get this far. So um, we just gradually built from a very small ambition, um, and things just kind of evolved, and then we ended up here. So I don't think it was never a fight that we're going to remain fiercely independent. We just always were, and we just kind of got bigger than we ever anticipated.
If
Uh,
you were to relaunch your brand, let's say in 2020, do you think it would be possible to make it internationally without the hedge fund backing?
yeah, it's it. it doesn't it seems discouraging. I had when I started out, there was a lot less brands, and I had a moment with enough space around me that people were able to register who I am, and they were able to. I was able to create an identity. I had enough space and enough time that people could figure me out, and something could click. Um, no, I don't see how anybody has that space anymore. Um, and there is so much. There's so much, so many strident voices out there that to be able to stand out, I don't see how it can be done. But you know, it's evolution. Maybe fashion has reached some kind of fever pitch where fashion or the whole idea of fashion will become old-fashioned. I don't know. I'm open to anything. I mean, you can see how the internet has just made everybody a designer. Um,
Maybe a solution lies in the answer of the following question. What would you consider the golden ratio between the business know-how and this kind of creative alchemy in the success in the fashion industry?
well, I already said, I mean, you know, I think creativity is 5% and 95% is execution. I mean, a lot of people have great ideas, but to get it executed with the right touch and just like to get it, I mean, um, just in the way hymns are finished or the way there's so many decisions and so many elements that can go wrong and the way linings are put in. I mean, the way a piece of clothes feels, a piece of clothing feels. Um, and then getting it into the right store at the right time, at the right price. There's so many variables. It's magic when all of that kind of comes together and it kind of works. So, and that's why it's so compelling because it's magic.
Do you feel enormous pressure to deliver on the financial goals, and how does that impact the creativity?
I don't. Um, and that's because we started when we started we were so modest, our ambitions were so modest that as we gradually grew, um, it just snuck up on me. And it's not like I ever walked into a company as the new creative director that had the responsibility of equaling last year's sales. So it was such a subtle transition. And I even, but I am aware of responsibility, and uh, I have to kind of click my head into reminding myself not to be responsible. Um, because if I start getting responsible, then I'm going to start. Something's going to get lost.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to remind myself, okay, I know that I'm being influenced by a lot of things around me. I mean, I know what the sales are like in the stores. I know how things are going. Now I have to shut all of that off, and I have to remind myself, what is it that I really want to see? And and I also have to remind myself, don't worry about it. This is just supposed to be fun. Um, so that kind of that I don't know if that's getting harder. I don't think so.
I think it's always hard for every generation, so you just kind of come out of that. You know, within the last decade, you have received, you know, the Emergent Talent Award, the Rule Breaker Award, and the Lifetime Achievement Award from CFDA. A kind of a full circle of awards in such a short span of time. Let me ask you, do such milestones motivate you, or do they add pressure to impress more and excite?
Oh no, no, no. They validate what I'm doing, and uh, I value these things a lot. I don't disregard them.
You feel liberated from the pressure to somehow prove yourself once you receive these type of accolades.
Well, I mean, like the emerging one was, like 15 years ago or something, and then the lifetime achievement was a couple of years ago, and there were kind of two lifetime achievement awards and a retrospective at the same time, and it was very much like, thanks very much, get off the stage. Um, but no, they were really validating, really, really validating, and it was kind of relaxing. I was thinking, well, I did what I needed to do. I said what I needed to say, um, and this is more of a release. Like, okay, it worked. It worked. People got it, and it worked, um, and I still have a lot of energy, and I can kind of relax and not be self-conscious, and I can be reckless, which I think is a really good thing, creatively. And I have a such a solid I have business partners that have been with me for the past 18 years, and I have so much faith in what they do, um, that I'm feeling super liberated. I'm feeling it's, and I'm not feeling like, oh, I can get away with anything, but I do feel like I can take chances, and taking chances is essential. That's the most exciting thing. Uh, and I'm also grateful. I'm thinking, I can't believe we made it this far. If I, and at this point, even if I start making really terrible collections, we can probably coast for maybe 3 years before we totally crash and burn. So that's a nice feeling.
Absolutely. Talk, you're such a prolific creator. In 2006, you commissioned a series of wax statues of yourself and referred to it as your Dorian Gray moment.
Yeah.
And then I kind of counteract that with the notes from your latest collection, where you refer to yourself, and I quote, as a 58-year-old man at the peak of his all too numbered powers. Okay, what is your relationship to aging now?
Um, well, I'm getting a bald spot, and I'm thinking, okay, I've had long black hair for a long time. Do I let it go white now? I'm not going to cut it, but it's getting really thin and weird. Um,
But do you find comfort or maybe certain wisdom in the aging process?
I do. Although, um, what you were talking about, I'd spoken about anger a while ago, in some of my show notes, and I was kind of horrified, because I thought, I've worked so hard to be self-aware and to be, um, introspective, and to kind of to work on forgiving myself my flaws, and that's what I've been telling everybody else. That it's great as you go along. You learn how to work with what you've got, and make the best of your assets. And so you would think that you would learn to find a higher level of serenity. And I'm very disappointed to tell you that that hasn't happened. I'm not as serene as I'd like to be. I still get I still get perturbed by things that I shouldn't, that I feel like I shouldn't be, that I should be, more developed. Um, it just kind of frustrates me sometimes that I'm petty. I feel like I'm being petty. So, the good thing about that is that there's still things to react to, because being somebody that makes things, an important thing is to have something to push against, I think. And I still feel rage and frustration. I still see bigotry out there that I want to combat more than ever. So I guess it's a good thing.
In many ways, I think it humanizes you
I
in the
don't want to
eyes of,
be human.
but but we all have feelings, right?
I don't want to be human.
You know, you built such a reputation with the hip hop community and culture. You know, from Jose's Guapos track to name drops by ASAP Rocky. I'm curious, what's hip hop to Rick Owens?
Um, that's an interesting question because the hip hop that I've been attracted to the most is the ladies. Lady, as a matter of fact, Lady and Katie Got Bands. I like it when the woman's voice um, takes on the aggression that we hear in a lot of the male hip hop music. I like it when the woman takes on that role. That's the most satisfying hip hop for me. And Katie Got Bands actually um, was a revelation for me. This was a um, there was such chic in her delivery and her but there was such cold hard aggression that I just loved. Um, it was chilling, and it is chilling. Um, that's um, yeah. That's kind of the peak of hip hop for me. But I enjoy listening to everything. So
I can tell because you also collaborated with Estonian metal band Winnie Pooh in 2014, and then Estonian hip hop artist Tommy Cash last year. I'm how do you explain this special affinity for
I
this
can't.
post-Soviet Baltic nation?
Isn't that the weirdest thing? It was a weird coincidence. It's not like that's where my focus was at. They just crossed my radar and it just registered. And I wonder, and both of those groups, both of those artists, um, the thing that they do have in common, though, is that there was a kind of absurdity to what they do. There was this reckless absurdity, and and a recklessness. They kind of went too far, and I love that. And I hadn't seen that kind of energy for a long time. There was no safety net in what they do, and I loved that. And a sense of humor.
And it's
There's
fascinating.
definitely a weird sense of humor in what they do.
Um, I'm gonna switch gears a little bit. Your atelier is set up in the former offices of the French president Francois Mitterrand. Um, and me personally, I'm very interested in, and I research a lot about the impact of fashion on politics and politics on fashion. How do you see the potential of fashion as a tool for diplomacy?
Well, it's very, 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 very subtle. Fashion, I would say fashion is communication, and the way you present yourself is who you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's why it's always been very important to me to kind of tweak convention in the when I present clothes. I want to make a pair of shorts that has a subtle variation, because fashion is about symbols and about subtle um, signifiers. And when I make a black skirt, there's something in the cut of that is a little bit that is pushing against convention in a very subtle way. Um, and somebody is going to recognize that, and align themselves with that and be encouraged that somebody is encouraging them to push in a different direction. Um, that eventually is going to influence something else. So it's like the kernel of an influence. Um, but I think it is, it's the seed of something, and if it's energy that I'm putting out there, that that what is the word, disseminates, I think that evolves and that spreads. Um, so when I make clothes that are pushing against a conservative, intolerant bigotry, and when I make shows, present shows that are pushing against that, that are encouraging other people to want to push back, I feel like I'm doing the right thing. And I feel like that is a political gesture in a very, very subtle way.
I was doing my research and I could not find an example of a first lady or a president being dressed in your garments. What would a leader or a nation or a world be like to see Rick Owens' state dinner outfit?
Well, I think Michelle Obama wore a jacket of mine to some event. And so that was, and, I'm conscious that when people like that, when, celebrities are going to wear your stuff just because they buy one of everything. So, I mean, you're going to just end up on a celebrity at some point or another. But a figure, a political figure like that, that's a lot more thought out, which I thought was kind of interesting. I thought, and they invited us we went to the White House for dinner. Actually, we got invited to the last state dinner of the Obamas. And I was thinking, well, that's kind of a weird move. Because this was after, and I heard from her stylist, the person who had been working on her clothes for all these years, that it was a little tricky getting us vetted, because when they researched us, the Obama security or whatever, that was after the penis show, and they came across a lot of exposed penises on the runway, and somehow somebody decided that that was the right thing, and that this was a designer that was going to be recognized by the White House. Um, so that impressed me. That was kind of a weird move on their part, but nice.
But what a kind of an intersection, right?
Yeah.
Your shows have drawn a wide range of responses, from admiration to admonition. Um, what makes fashion such a magnet for social debate and conflict? Why can't clothes just be apolitical?
Yeah. Well, people get outraged over everything now, don't they? And it's a very sensitive, very belligerent time out there. I don't know if they're as controversial, if they're more controversial than anything else. I mean, um, movies are controversial, books are controversial, any kind of creative expression. I mean, you're going to find huge debates about anything. Um,
And are you comfortable being the lightning rod for some of these culture wars?
yeah, I totally like fucking with people. I love provoking people. I mean, when you put exposed penises on a runway, then the people are Oh, you know what was funny when I did that show? I don't know why I'm dwelling on that. I never really talk about my shows, and I never talk about things that I do because I don't believe in explaining anything. I mean, either you get it or you don't, and no explanation from me is going to convince anybody. I mean, it works or it doesn't. But what's funny is that night after the night after that show on TV, Car or maybe it was at it was at the Chanel show, I think, or I don't know. Karl Lagerfeld was on TV, and Karl Lagerfeld, um, they asked him, "What did you think of the Rick Owens show?" And Karl Lagerfeld kind of went off, and he goes, like it was disgusting, saying like that charcuterie, and like I hear he had to get boys from Berlin because real models would never do that kind of thing, and I was well delighted because I mean I always thought Karl Lagerfeld was a bit of I thought he was kind of a nasty person, um, but also I was thinking, well, that's who would have expected Karl Lagerfeld to be so uptight? Because here is a man who has focused his camera on like the glistening pubic hairs of young men for years, and he's promoted uh, young men naked, looking over their shoulder, invitingly as coquettes, and that's exactly the kind of thing I was kind of um, that coquettishness was kind of there was a preciousness to it that kind of irritated me, and I thought and male nudity, like the male penis is such a guarded secret by a male dominated society. I thought presenting it in a flaccid, irreverent, um, indifferent state is going to make a lot of men angry.
Yeah, you
And I was
disempowered
surprised,
something.
huh?
You disempowered something.
Yes, and I was surprised that somebody as evolved um, and as aware as Karl Lagerfeld allowed himself to be disturbed by that.
Well, talking about famous people, a lot of famous folks get misquoted or words are simply assigned to them. And you are a prolific quotation producer. I even came across an entire Tumblr account dedicated to your allegedly quotations. And it's imaginatively called Rick Owens Said. I'm going to run three quotes by you just to see if you remember saying that and maybe give us a 1 or 2 second context or maybe expand on the idea.
So you're saying, Rick Owens, explain yourself.
In a way, but surprisingly, you actually maybe one out of the three you already mentioned, but I'm going to repeat it. So, quoting you first, believe me, I'm as surprised as you are that we've made it this far. Give us a little bit of the context where this quote came from.
I don't remember. It was in an interview, and I really don't remember what that was an answer to. But I mean, I've say it ever since then. I think I've probably said it pretty frequently.
And how relevant for our times, right? And then second one, comfort isn't always important. Sometimes standing higher, straighter, and prouder is. And there is something wonderfully transgressive and virile in seeing the right man in heels. Can you expand on that idea?
Oh, I thought, is that one quote?
It's one full quote, yes.
Okay, because I've talked about discipline a lot. I usually talk about it when it comes to when people ask me about the furniture that we do, because the furniture, a lot of people go, "Oh my God, it looks so hard and uncomfortable," and I'm a big believer in discipline. I think people have allowed themselves to get a little bit too comfortable. Um, I think a little formality in this world isn't the worst thing. I'm not criticizing anybody. I'm just saying I vote for a little formality every once in a while, and that's kind of what I'm gonna do. You guys can do what you want to, but I like to have a little bit of formality and rigor in my life to make things a little bit more um, rigorous. I mean, we all appreciate a little bit of rigor and a little bit of stability, a little bit of formality, a little bit of um, something that feels like that aligns with values that are more eternal and more formal and more polite.
It almost sounds like it's the balance of it all, right? It in a way.
I mean, this is funny coming from me that also promotes complete release. So but that's my personal journey, and that's the kind of that's what I've always kind of presented. I've always presented my own personal, um, I wouldn't say struggle, but uh, trying to find that balance between rigor and complete collapse, because I've been extremely attracted to both, and either one in the extreme is a disaster. So trying to get that balance right has been the search of my life, and I think by talking about it, I think people, and somehow my clothes express that. Um, I assume, because not literally, but in general, the story that I've been saying all along, that's been my story, and that is a story that every single person can connect with, and that is an eternal struggle, the eternal struggle of trying to find the balance between complete control and complete collapse. Um, so when it comes to things like heels, lipstick, there are certain things that you do, that somebody does, that is a signal to everybody else that I'm living life um, making a special effort. I am making an effort to present myself and to live with a certain kind of um, um, how many times have I used the word rigor? But I mean, that's the best word to use. I mean, when a woman at a certain point of the day decides to put on lipstick, that is a signal that she's going to feel differently. She's going to change the way she feels. She's going to change the way that she presents herself to people. When there's the same thing with heels. When a man puts on heels, he is saying, I'm presenting myself in a altered state that is anti um, relaxed. It is more formal, it is more aware, it is more heightened. Um, um,
It takes you to a certain different dimension in a way.
yeah, and it's a signal. You are saying something to people.
There was one quotation that particularly struck me, and you said the following words: that the coolest thing is when you don't care about being cool anymore. Indifference is the greatest aphrodisiac, and that's what really sums up style for me. So let me ask you, Rick, how do you reconcile this odd to indifference with passion for your craft?
Yeah, there has to be a lightness. And that goes back to finding the balance between control and collapse. You have to be able to find that tricky little sweet spot where you um, you have enough skill at what you do that you can treat it lightly. You can you have enough cultivation, you've learned enough that um, you have it in your, you have enough assets and you're comfortable enough with what you've got and your control over your powers that you can wear it lightly. Um, Yeah, that's great style, and that's that balance thing, and that's the sweet spot that everybody wants. The sweet spot where everybody wants to be smart and have every have their life together and be able to wear that lightly. Um,
Something that I'm trying to hone all my life.
we all
I,
are, but we all are, all of us, and we all know it.
I want to wrap up with the last couple questions. You know, you author books, you do furniture, you've designed for Opera Garnier. What else are you excited to experiment with? Where should we expect Rick Owens next?
Oh. Yeah, I have no idea. I would love to complete to keep on doing this design thing. Um, at some point, we're going to start doing shows again because we just will.
For
Uh, I love participating in the world, and I admit that I found a way to do it in a very controlled, very um, distant way. um, but I did find my own personal way of contributing, or not contributing, but participating, um, which which I'm very which is very fulfilling because I could have been somebody who just um, stayed in my mom's bedroom playing video games for the rest of my life. I mean, I could have been one of those guys. Um, so the fact that I was able to find a way to be comfortable but throw myself out there at the same time. Um, yeah, that's great that that worked out. I have no idea what I'll do next.
well,
I,
wait to
I,
keep us anticipating.
I don't really have architectural ambitions because architecture just takes too long. I'm used to like a faster pace. I can't wait 5 years for a project to get done. I mean, that's the downside of what I do. I'm used to a pace that's kind of a brisk pace. So
So
yeah,
maybe, go ahead.
I think no, I think I can keep evolving what I've got on my plate now, and that's very satisfying, and that's enough for me.
I want to conclude by asking you, what is the most pressing question on Rick Owens' mind right now?
A pressing question.
Yeah, the most pressing question.
The most pressing question. God, I'm not very stressed. I've been at the beach for a week, and um, I'm pretty good at pacing myself. So I don't really have a lot of pressures. I mean, the thing that I'm thinking about is exactly how is our pre-collection showroom or pre-collection digital showroom presentation, how is that going to come out? Because it's not finalized. And I'm going to the factory, I'm in the Lido in Venice, but it's a 2-hour drive to the factory in Concordia. I'm going there Thursday evening, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I'll be reviewing all of the pre-collection samples that I've been seeing that I've been seeing images of all week. Um, and I'll be able to see the final format of our digital showroom, which is new, obviously, because of the coronavirus situation. So that's kind of that's what's on my table right now. And then after that, it's figuring out. Um, I'll be working on men's and women's spring runway. And when I say runway, I'm not sure what that format's going to be, but it's a collection for that time slot.
Well, I'm looking forward to discovering. And I want to say big thank you, Rick, for finding time to speak to us today. Thank you,
It's a
Polimoda.
pleasure, and I've always admired Polymoda and what they do and who comes out of there. So I'm very happy to be a part of this. I'd like to thank the team there and everybody. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you. Thank you, Martina. Thank you, Danila. And thank you all for watching.